Um, oh, hi. Yeah, so my stream is working. Okay. So, I just wanted to make sure my stream was working first. Okay. So, I'm not actually expecting that many people to be here or anything, but that's alright, because it's just my first debut stream. I'll turn the music down a little bit. Okay, so, basically, I'm gonna be talking about myself a bit in this debut stream. I've got lots of other content. I think probably most of my better content's probably going to be videos and stuff anyway. Like I've got video reviews on like Star Wars and Star Trek films, and I'm probably going to do more of those. And like as time goes by, I'll probably like man, I'm so freaking nervous. Anyway, let's just go on with it. Okay, so I'm Crosmatron, or Crosmatron, and I am a Martian VTuber extraordinaire. I'm going to explain why I'm a Martian. It all makes perfect sense. There's nothing weird about it. So basically, what we know, and this is semi-common knowledge in certain circles, but basically Mars and Earth were switched prior to 1998. It's believed to have happened sometime in the 1980s, so it probably happened around about like 1988, something like that. But basically what happened is there was this what happened was all of the people from Earth were transferred to Mars, and then the old Earth was terraformed to look like Mars. And so what happened was Earth was originally the fourth planet from the sun, and it was smaller than it is now because they were switched around. So the reason this happened, well, basically there was two groups in the government that decided that basically they wanted different outcomes for humans in going into the future. Basically, one was aware of an upcoming extinction event that was going to happen in 1998, and they knew that they needed to switch the people between the planets in order to avoid this catastrophe from occurring. So they just basically there was this alien race that we knew was coming, and they would basically what they would do is go around the galaxy, and they would basically have they were basically would start manage an apocalypse themselves. So basically wipe out what they consider to be all the bad people on each planet with intelligent life. And the reason they did this was to prevent planets from progressing and becoming too dangerous in the galaxy generally, because they were worried that planets would especially with things like going to the moon and so on in the 1960s. Sorry, basically they were worried about the progress of humanity, so they wanted to get rid of like a large percentage of the population to make it very difficult for us to expand further. So that was planned for 1998, but that didn't actually happen at all because of the planet switch, and that's why we wanted to do a planet switch, was basically just to get the aliens actually had an agreement with the world governments to do an apocalypse in 1998, but when the planets were switched, the contract was deemed void, basically. And there was actually another alien race that helped us move everybody in the middle of the night in around about 1988. This is why I'm a Martian, because I was born prior to the switch. And most people watching this stream, if anybody watches this stream, were probably born after that. So they probably, the planet I was born on is what we call Mars now. And the planet that you're born on is now called, it's now called Earth. But really, this is Mars. The planet that we're all on now is Mars. But because of the name change, I mean, it's not really, is it? Because everybody agreed that the planet we're on now is called Earth. So there's lots of confusion and stuff originally, because there were people saying like in the late 80s, they were saying they were saying things like, I was sure that Earth was the fourth planet not the third planet and stuff like that. But there were lots of textbook revisions and things to try and correct it as much as possible in old media. Like bits of like sci-fi movies and stuff were trimmed to remove references to like what planet from the sun, Earth or Mars was, in order to so that people wouldn't realize that this had happened. And it was so that's my thing. So I'm the Martian because I was born on the planet that is now called Mars. That is why I'm a Martian. If anybody has any questions about this, I will do further content on this planet switch thing and try and convince you that it definitely happened. And like, hopefully you won't have any further arguments. Maybe I'll do a video or stream on it at some point. Wouldn't that be fun? Yeah. And really what happened was, like, it wasn't talked about publicly, like, even though the governments knew, because they didn't want any legislatures involved or anything like that. So they basically just got like the Queen and the President and a few other like heads of state into a room and said like, oh, this is what's happening and stuff. And some were happy for the apocalypse to go on because they were like, well, the apocalypse won't affect us, probably. They'll probably only affect like people who are really bad people or whatever. But like they didn't even know, right? So world leaders didn't know that when the apocalypse, they didn't know if when the apocalypse happened that it would affect them personally as an individual person or not. They had no idea. So and the aliens wouldn't tell them either when they asked, because they'd be like, oh, am I a good person? And the aliens just wouldn't answer that. They'd be like, well, I'm not telling you. So yeah, so if you like, feel free to leave comments, and I'll definitely try to convince you. My voice sounds really nervous. It's not to do with the content, it's not to do with what I'm saying, it's just like because I'm streaming it live. Anyway, so let's just go on to the next slide. Okay, like this is the likes and dislikes portion. Like, if there's actually anybody here that we can do a QA, but I've got nobody in chat, at least according to my OBS, there's nobody in chat. So, which is, well, it's what I expected. So, yeah, so likes and dislikes, these are random ones. Yeah, so Total Recall. I like Total Recall because it's about Mars, and I like Mars, and I want to go back there at some point to visit, like, where I used to live and stuff. But they terraformed it now, so Mars now looks like Mars used to look like before this planet switch happened. But basically in Mars, you've got the guy Douglas Quaid, sorry, in Total Recall, you've got the guy Douglas Quaid who's like, oh, I want to go to Mars, I don't really have any reason, I just like it. And that's kind of my attitude too. That's why I like the movie so much, because it's about a guy who likes Mars, but then it turns out that he has lived on Mars a lot, and like, he is a dude who is very Mars savvy, right? He just doesn't know it, and that's why I like movies and I like media where there's a lot of identity crisis and people not being aware of like parts of themselves or something like that, or anything to do with like analyzing people's identities, I guess. So Total Recall kind of hits everything. Plus there's a lot of ambiguities towards the ending, because there's like 4 different possible endings at least. People often say there's 2, which is that either the guy has a schizoid embolism or he saves Mars, but actually there's all the different options with regarding Johnny Cox, or Ronnie Cox, I think his name is, the bad guy, because like it's possible that he was a double agent or a triple agent or whatever the whole time. You don't really know, because like there's some footage that is shown that is probably faked, but it's like, it leaves it very, but almost everything that happens in the movie is extremely ambiguous and could mean or be real or not be real, pretty much. So like, except for, well, yeah, so that's why I like the movie. I think it's like, there's not many good Hollywood movies, I think, in the long run. Not really. And Total Recall is definitely one of the top ones that, in terms of the quality of the writing and things. Plus, I think almost all of the special effects in the movie, they're all practical. And there's like a small amount of CGI, which looks quite good for the time anyway. But the synth music is really good, and the practical effects all still hold up for the most part, and there's a lot of model effects as well, prosthetics, and so on. So yeah, scored by Jerry Goldsmith, which is one of the best Jerry Goldsmith scores, and it's amazing. And Arnold Schwarzenegger is okay in it. He basically comes across in a way where you can like empathize with him as a character well enough. Like, although having a big bulky guy like who looks like an action hero as the main character in the movie doesn't really make sense. But yeah. Neon Genesis Evangelion. I was at least in my head, I was Shinji when I was a kid. I would say probably most similar, like including all of Shinji's really bad character traits, which I won't go into, but I could at least sympathize or empathize with Shinji a lot, especially in End of Evangelion. I won't explain any further, but no, I'm just saying, like, I'm saying that he's a very relatable character, and yeah, I'll just leave it at that. But like, basically, if you don't know what Neon Genesis Evangelion is, it's about the end of the world again. Anything to do with the end of the world is inherently very interesting, and it's not quite the end of the world because it's all about how there's like, basically what could happen is if Shinji doesn't get in the fucking robot, is that everybody could get turned into Fanta. That's what is going to happen, and but in the end he has mixed results. That's how I'll describe it. There is a remake called The Rebuild, and in The Rebuild the plot is substantially different, and Shinji is written in a very different way, and I think it's mostly because the creator was much older at the time and he couldn't really remember what it was like to be a teenage boy, so that's why. But it's okay. The Rebuild is okay, but he even admitted that in interviews. He said that he had difficulty writing the character while he was an older man because he couldn't really remember being a teenage boy. So it was like he couldn't sympathize or empathize with the character he was trying to write, who was the main character, which is fine. Okay, the next one, that's Pipa. Pipa is my Oshi. Next one. Yeah, so my next like and dislikes is Star Trek. I freaking love Star Trek. Captain Kirk, Jean-Luc Picard, or is it Captain Kirk and Jean-Luc Picard? I don't know. I don't remember, but you know, basically they're both captains of the Enterprise, not at the same time. Because one of them, this guy's in the original show from the 60s and in the movies. In the 80s, and then this guy was in the late 80s in the TV show and in the 90s in the movies. And yeah, so Star Trek Next Generation movies, in my opinion, I used to like them when I was a kid, but I think they've really not held up. They have good effects and stuff in places, but they're not well written and they're not well. Like, some of the performances are even a bit rough, and I just like, it's weird because like I would say Patrick Stewart is a way better actor than Kirk, but I think if you pick all the best moments in the movies, like throughout the 80s and the 90s, pretty much all the best acting scenes are actually this guy and not this guy. And that's because this guy watched this guy when this guy was growing up. This guy was like, oh, Star Trek is all about fighting and having sex with aliens, right? Because that's what he saw in Star Trek. And that's kind of correct, except that there wasn't a lot of that in Star Trek The Next Generation, because by the 80s, that sort of like masculine playboy attitude was already sort of falling out of favor a bit and being seen as very not woke, I guess. And like, Star Trek has always generally been quite a woke show. I think in the 60s, the sort of free love movement and stuff meant that having sex with aliens was seen as very progressively minded in the 60s. But Sir Patrick Stewart complained all the time that he didn't get to have sex with aliens, really, while he was the captain. So they sort of tried to add more of that in. And yeah, and also he complained that he didn't get to do enough fighting, because they'd basically written him as a sort of diplomat type character, whereas Kirk was basically just punching all the aliens in the face, which was more entertaining television. And you could even complain, oh, maybe Star Trek's kind of boring when the captain's not punching people in the face all the time, but that's why they had Jonathan Frakes playing Commander Riker, because the idea was that he would punch aliens in the face instead, but they never really included much punching aliens in the face in the show. Lieutenant Commander Worf punched most of the aliens in the face, although he was only a lieutenant in the TV show, but he was promoted to Lieutenant Commander during Star Trek Generations, the first Star Trek The Next Generation movie. But yeah, but basically he's the Klingon one on Star Trek The Next Generation, and he would punch aliens in the face, and then the alien would usually punch him back in the face way harder, which was a sort of trope to... Because you'd go, oh, Worf is really tough. He punches aliens in the face all the time. And then, oh, now he's getting punched in the face really hard by this alien. That means he must be under threat. So that would add a lot of tension and drama to the episode of television. Okay, so. Next bit. Okay. Likes and dislikes. Oh yeah, I mean, Star Trek-wise, I'm going to be doing a lot more Star Trek reviews going forward on my channel, probably. I had a lot of copyright issues, but I think all of the copyright issues I had were to do with me using NTSC version of the video CD I used to watch Star Trek V, and I think if I used the PAL version, because the PAL movies are basically sped up about 6% or something like that in order to change the frame rate from 24 to 25 FPS. So basically, if you speed up a movie, I think it gets past all of YouTube's copyright detection. So I'm going to do that going forward. So yeah, likes and dislikes. I like Godspeed You Black Emperor. This album cover is Lift Your Skinny Fists Like Antennas to Heaven, which is probably one of their better albums. This is a double album, so it's really long. It's got three 20-minute songs and one 12-minute song. I think it's 12 minutes. And it's like basically perfect, right? My favorite, everybody likes the start of the album because it's very brassy. It's got lots of brass instruments and it sounds really nice, and they all build up on top of each other, and there's like two drums. One of the really cool things about Godspeed You Black Emperor is that they have two drummers, and they basically always get used, and they also bring in people with like brass instruments or violins or whatever, or then xylophones and so on, as well as having like there's no vocals either. Not much. There's a bit of vocalization later on in the album, but in this case, but not much. And it's not like the norm for them. They're basically an instrumental band, but their music is really it's not ambient music. I've heard a lot of people describe it as ambient music, but it's actually way too intense to be described as ambient music. It's actually just rock music, really, but with lots of weird different instruments that you wouldn't normally hear, and lots of very long repetitive atonal parts which all sound amazing. And I have all their albums on CD and on vinyl, and because I'm old, and yeah, so I don't know if they're still going as a band. Last I heard they were, because they'd come back. I've seen them live twice. The second time, my hearing's not very good anymore, so the second time I went to see them I could not hear anything because my ears just blew out. And yeah, so it just sounded like, and I was like, that kind of sounds like their music. But no, I actually couldn't hear anything. I found that I could fix it a bit by like putting my ear flaps over my ears, and then I could hear a bit of the music. And I was like, hey, that technique works really well. When music's really loud or something and I can't hear anything, if I put my ear flaps over my ear holes, then I can suddenly make out what the music is. Amazing. So yeah, I mean, but they have a lot of albums as well. Even originally they stopped after like 3 albums in one EP, and then they've since released like 3 more albums, I think, at least. After they went on hiatus for a long time. So the second album I've got here is Pink Floyd's Animals, which is my it's probably my favorite Pink Floyd album. I like the Syd Barrett album too, which is called Piper at the Gates of Dawn, which is a really whimsical album with lots of really silly songs on it, which is very fun. And it's very underrated, but most Pink Floyd people like the really long, boring songs, which I do as well. So Animals has like 3 20-minute songs on it, as well as one song at the start, which is like 1.5 minutes, and then one song at the end, which is like a minute and a half. And so it's got the all the songs are to do with different animals, and so it's kind of an Animal Farm style, like anthropomorph, well, animalizing, I guess, not on anthropomorph. Basically, it's saying that humans are like dogs, or they're like pigs, or they're like sheep. The pigs are like the rich ones who are right at the top, and then dogs are like the enforcers who do whatever the pigs say. And then the pigs like throw the scraps to the dogs to get them to do whatever. And dogs are completely ruthless and will do anything, but basically have no friends, and they all die alone and miserable, and they hate themselves and their lives, but they will murder people so that pigs can be happy, basically. And by people I mean sheep. Sorry, I don't mean people. They murder sheep so that the pigs can be happy. That's basically what the album is. And, you know, there's a lot of bits making fun of Mary Whitehouse during the Pigs song. For some reason, they think Mary Whitehouse is a pig in the album. I don't know if she really counts. She's kind of, because I mean, she's quite a famous person in the media in Britain in like the 70s and 80s particularly, but basically she was just complaining constantly about sexual references in TV shows, even TV shows meant for adults. She would just constantly complain, or about lewd jokes in TV shows and media and stuff. She'd be like constantly complaining in the media about it, and it would annoy the hell out of everybody. And there's a bit in Pigs where basically like Roger Waters is like making fun of her and stuff, and you go, oh, he says White House all the time, so it sounds like he's talking about like the American White House, but he's not. And yeah, so Dogs is probably the more interesting song musically, because it's got lots of very long guitar parts and very long keyboard parts, and they all sort of blend together really nicely. And there's a lot of different segments of the song, and then it kind of has a reprise a bit. And for some reason, the vocalist changes over from Gilmour to Waters, but doesn't seem to do it in a way that makes sense. Just seems to be what works musically, because Waters has more of an annoying voice, but Gilmour doesn't have a very strong voice. He's got kind of a weedy voice. And yeah, and then Sheep is all about how the sheep all get massacred so that the pigs can be, you know, they basically just like are dumb and will go along with the flow, and then they get taken advantage of and so on. But Sheep is most famous for the line, "Ha sure you are." I'll try and say that again because I slowed it a bit. "Ha sure you are," which was used in South Park, because there was an episode of South Park where Cartman kept saying it. He kept saying, "Ha sure you are," and I was like, as a kid, I was like, I don't understand what he's saying or what it means, but it means like, "Ha, you're a charade, you're a joke." That's the point. Anyway, next, like and dislikes. I'm just gonna keep ranting and stuff because there's nobody in my chat. Anyway, so Wonder Chosen. Like and dislikes. This one's more comedies. These are all American comedies. Wonder Chosen is the one where the like, that's racist, and sorry, it's that's racist. Sorry, I can't do the. I'm trying to copy the bit, and the slaves song, and you know, all those sorts of meme stuff like that. Everything like that you've seen comes from Wonder Chosen. And this is a lunchbox that they made originally, and it was going to be widely available at retail with the DVD in it, and you could use it as a lunchbox. And it says "scrubbing off the blood of the working class," which is very true. And yeah, so on there you have I'm trying to remember their names, because that's the other one's Chauncey. It's been a while since I watched it. My memory's not very good. Okay. So I can't remember all their names. Oh, the brown one's called Him, I think. I don't remember. But basically, Wonder Chosen was made by 4 people, and the 4 people are represented there by drawings, but they're puppets in the show. It's Sesame Street ripoff, so it's mostly kids and puppets. And Clarence goes around the street talking to like homeless people and harassing them and stuff, basically. And people try and run away from him, and he says like, "What are you running away from?" and stuff like that. It's quite funny. Anyway, highly recommended. It's got lots of really nice animation in it. A lot of the animation's actually surprisingly good considering when it was made, and that's because one of the guys did all the animation. So basically, Trayvon Clayton, who is Chauncey, and Clarence, He was also Towley in South Park, and he helped to he was the main writer on this, but he helped write a lot of South Park, and he also helped to write a lot of Louis with Louis C.K. Before all of the controversies and stuff with Louis C.K. and yeah, so he's quite a prolific guy, that guy, but he's not very famous. But you would have heard his voice a lot in things if you watch a lot of comedies like I have. You will either have watched stuff written by him or watch stuff where he's doing voices and stuff. But he almost always has a really high pitched voice. Like he puts on a high pitched voice. But yeah, I'm trying to remember how Chauncey talks. Chauncey Extreme. Anyway, so Drawn Together is Drawn Together. The most interesting thing about Drawn Together is that after being on air for a couple of seasons, there was a deal with Hot Topic, so that Hot Topic should carry Drawn Together merch, and basically everybody from Drawn Together was really excited, so the deal went down to their local Hot Topic, because they were told that there would be merch there by their studio, because the studio had arranged for there to be merch at Hot Topic in general. So when they went to Hot Topic, they asked the clerk, one of the guys who makes Drawn Together, asked the clerk where the Drawn Together merch is, and there wasn't any on display, and the clerk said, what's Drawn Together? So yeah. But it's interesting, because like I said, Pippa is my Oshi, but Pippa's had her merch at Hot Topic as well. And so maybe there's a similar story there as well. But anyway, so that's why in an episode of Drawn Together, they like go into a Hot Topic and kill the person who works there, and they discover that the Hot Topic has like slaves and stuff, and yeah, and torture rooms and stuff. So basically Hot Topic is portrayed as a really evil place in the show, which makes sense and is quite fun. And yeah, so Drawn Together is basically just meant to be a parody of reality TV shows, and it's basically like the interesting thing about it was the only reason it got cancelled wasn't even because it was controversial, except it was controversial enough that a lot of companies that advertised on it on Comedy Central didn't want to, but like the advertisers basically hated it, is what I'm saying. But they originally, when it was pitched to Comedy Central, they said, we'll just make it with Flash animation, it'll be really cheap, and then you don't have to worry about anything. And then the studio said, well, Comedy Central, they said, okay, we don't actually want to use Flash animation because it looks really terrible. We want to use frickin' cell animation, like a real animated show. So, like, South Park was, like, famous at the time for having quite bad animation, but South Park cheats because the animation in South Park is not bad, it's designed to look the way it looks. It is actually very good animation, but they also use 3D packages to do all the animation in South Park, and they've worked out how to do it in an efficient way, so they can do 20 minutes of animation and knock it out very quickly over a couple of days. But basically, Drawn Together's animation style would take months to animate and not even be worth it, really. But you'd get slightly better animation out of it. But I think, to be honest, yeah, the show would have been hard to sell on syndication and stuff if they did actually use Flash animation. I think the animation would have been a bit too rough. So, like, they definitely sold it around the world well, because, like, Drawn Together was available in pretty much every country in some form through syndication. It might have been a package deal with South Park or something, who knows. But yeah, but basically, whatever country you're in, like, some version of Drawn Together, maybe heavily censored, whatever, but it was always, like, available. So the other one here is Metalocalypse. So Metalocalypse is by Brendan Small. So he does the voice of Nathan Explosion and Squizcar and Murderface, and no, sorry, he does Pickles. He doesn't do Murderface. And then the other guy who co-created it with him, whose name I forget, Tony Blanchard, I think his name is. Anyway, he did the voices for Toki and Murderface. So basically, Metalocalypse is about a metal apocalypse that's basically prophesized to be related to their band, and their band is called Death Clock, spelled with a K at the start of the clock word. And yeah, so basically there's like 4 seasons and 2 movies, and the first movie doesn't have any, like, Tony Blanchard had nothing to do with it. He did not help write it, he did not perform in it in any way. Like, basically, Brendan Small did all the like spoken voices, and then they got other singers to do the singing voices for Murderface and Toki, but that like that movie is amazing. It's a really good like opera slash musical that's metal, but it's all sort of like very melodic metal. But that's the thing. People complain because they're supposed to be a death metal band, and even the guy who, like, I think the guy who directed most of the early episodes of Metalocalypse complained later on that the show wasn't death metal enough, and the band wasn't death metal enough, considering that it's supposed to be a death metal band. And yeah, but he bring it up a lot in interviews and stuff. I think that guy died anyway now, because like, he doesn't seem to have. I'm pretty sure he died anyway. But yeah, sorry, bad for that guy. But like, yeah. So the show's very funny. It has lots of very funny moments. Like, there's a bit where they drink bleach in the show because they're trying to make themselves sick and stuff. And yeah, but yeah, by today's standards, the humor in all of these shows is considered like way too offensive and would not be allowed. But because they were made in the past, they're okay. Okay, so I've got some British shows because, you know, because technically I was born like in Wales, so I grew up watching a lot of British television and stuff as well as American television, because we had a lot of American television airing and had cable as well, cable TV, so there were a lot of American shows on cable TV as well. There's a lot of shows that I have not included in any of these lists, because potentially I could just include lots of music albums, lots of video games, lots of like TV shows and stuff, and you know, I've got a very small number of ones that I really wanted to show and talk about a bit. So the British version of House of Cards is the only one that really works, because they changed writers in the American one, because they kept the British guys on the American version of House of Cards because they wanted their influence on the show, but like the show deviates so much quite early on from the American show, but it doesn't work because the British show is really finely tuned in terms of the plot and what happens when and so on, and it really only works because it's so well executed. And the American show is like, because it deviates really hard, it doesn't really work anymore. And the American show, like the guy who started writing the American show, like he left at some point as well. So I think that's probably partially to do with it, and also the Kevin Spacey thing. But basically, if you want to watch House of Cards the way it was originally put together, and with all the people with annoying English accents and stuff, then you can watch this version of House of Cards. He's called Francis Urquhart in this version of House of Cards, not whatever he's called in the American one. Frank Underwood. Yeah, I remembered. My memory's not really good. Anyway, so next one I've got The New Statesman, which is kind of it's very similar to Yes Minister, Yes Prime Minister, which is the last one, except it's got Rick Mayall as so this is like the ITV like commercial television equivalent, because Yes Minister's a BBC show, this is an ITV show, and because of that it's a lot more crass and crude and commercial, and it's supposed to be very like popular, I guess, but this show is way meaner, like has way meaner misanthropic, anti-human, like it basically just sees all humans as inherently evil and base, I guess. Even it's a complex political thriller show, comedy show, with a comedian playing the main character, but basically everybody in the show is incredibly evil, and it's I mean, it's a sitcom ultimately, but it's like, it's actually much better written and much better executed than you would think, and Rick Mayall gives his best performance he's ever given in his career, pretty much, in the show, and he's just hilariously funny. All of the humor is really like base, but there's lots of quite insightful jokes and stuff in it, and it's based a lot on real politics, but it's like also not that realistic. Like, it goes for jokes much more than realism. Yes Minister is a much more realistic political comedy show. It's more even though it's on the BBC, and it's more like realistic and like showing how the real political system works in a way that most people didn't understand, because most people have no idea how internal government and politics works really, and in the show it was kind of revealed to the British public, and most people were like shocked that it's basically impossible to get anything done because of the way it's set up, and it's very wasteful and inefficient and so on. But there's lots of really funny, insightful jokes in the show, and it's definitely a comedy first. But it's like yeah, pretty basically every story that happens in every episode of the show is a reasonably accurate interpretation of a real thing that happened at some point in British politics, from an internal point of view. So it's like stuff that most people in the public didn't know happened at all. Even the one where they went to an Islamic country and they were drinking alcohol at a party in an Islamic country where alcohol was illegal, and members of the British government were completely wasted because they were drinking booze all night. That happened in real life, and it was in the show, and people were shocked because, like, well, most members of the public who watched it just assumed it was made up, but they literally based it on a real event, just a real event most normal people had never seen or heard about, and people were like, when people realized that it was a real thing that had happened, they were like blown away, I guess. But there were pretty much every episode something like that happens where it's just like surprising. But it's not just about British politics, because pretty much everything that happens in the show relates in some way to, say, American politics. Even though the UK at this point in history, even when the show was made, is a much smaller country with lots fewer people. But it's like, I think all of these shows are good enough. Also, the whole point of this show is that the guy's a murderer as well, and he doesn't care. Like, he basically murders his way to the top. And he's very, like, he's a libertarian, and he's a hedonist, even though he's conservative. But a lot of conservatives at the time in the UK were basically libertarian, especially young male conservatives were generally very libertarian and very hedonistic. More so than anybody, and they all ran pornography magazines and things like that. Famously, at the time, that was very common. So he's that type of person, and he likes the idea of like buying and selling like South African goods, even though they're basically like verboten in other countries. But they're really cheap and stuff. So so basically he's always doing stuff that is like really crass, and yeah. So let's go on to the next slide. Yeah, so, next slide. I've got Rise of the Robots, and I've got Human Killing Machine. You'll note that I called this section my likes and dislikes, but it doesn't have any dislikes in it. I did that on purpose because I don't tend to dislike things. I think that everything that is terrible has merit to it, or like is enjoyable on its own level. It's like trashy movies are pretty much always really fun to watch. Like even. And the other thing is, a lot of trashy movies that people make fun of as being trashy and not well written and not well acted and so on, they're usually made that way in the first place. Like, they don't have, if you're making a B movie and you don't have very much money, you're making it with the intention of it being a bit shit. And you kind of know that going in. And like, a lot of them filmmakers from, like, say, the 80s pumping out really bad straight to VHS movies, like, sort of knew that their stuff was terrible, but and they kind of wanted you to laugh at it a bit. And I think people like don't understand that that is like a thing. So like, it's very hard to make a high quality movie if you have no money, but you can still make it funny intentionally. So like, most jokes in those sorts of movies are like that because they're trying to be funny. It's not because, oh, that's what they kind of miss on like Best for the Worst or whatever. A lot of the time, is a lot of those movies are kind of meant to be laughed at in the first place. So you're not really very clever by like going, haha, this movie's really bad, let's laugh at it. It's like, it's meant to be laughed at. That's that. Like, they know that you're laughing at it for that reason, so you're not achieving anything new. Anyway, Evil Dead 2 is probably one of the better examples of a really obvious one. Evil Dead 2's mostly been reappraised at this point because it's a very well-directed, very well-executed movie that looks like a trashy 80s horror movie, but had a reasonable budget, really, considering what it was. It was like mid-budget, not high budget, but by any means. But for the sort of 80s horror movie, it was pretty much a mid-budget movie that was released in a lot of cinemas and so on. And the movie's very silly, and it's very like, haha, this is funny, let's laugh at it, and laugh at the silly, like, oh, the main character fell down, let's laugh at them and stuff. And it works well in that way, and that's why it's a very good movie and it's a very fun movie. But it was made with the intention of like the movie was made with the intention that you would laugh at it. Like, the filmmakers knew that. Anyway, but it's been reappraised because I think most people know that at this point, even though at the time a lot of people didn't. But I think at this point everybody knows that's the point of the movie, is that you're supposed to laugh at it. Like, the filmmakers knew and it's one of the funniest movies ever made. So there's no reason to not laugh at it. It's like it's meant to be funny. Anyway, so I've got Rise of the Robots and Human Killing Machine. The important thing to note about these two games is that they're both British games and they both have weird histories. Like Rise of the Robots is basically a reasonably over-budget game. It was in production way too long. They made loads and loads of CGI animations based on the characters and the animations for the gameplay and so on, and they did not manage to turn it into a working game. For some reason, there's an Amiga version of the game, and the developers kind of considered the Amiga version to be the main version, even though by the time it came out, the Amiga was long dead and nobody cared about the Amiga anyway. But they released like a PC CD-ROM version, which had, at the time, quite high-resolution versions of the graphics. The gameplay is completely nonsense. It just doesn't work. It feels like it almost works. The problem is, they did a Rise of the Robots 2 afterwards, using a proper game engine. I think Acclaim used their game engine, which is basically the Mortal Kombat game engine, and they basically plugged all the Rise of the Robots like art into it, and then released it as Rise of the Robots 2. And it looks and plays but really terribly, though. I just don't know how they managed that. But basically, Rise of the Robots 1 is the one you should play if you're going to play it. But the console versions have completely separate code to the Amiga and PC versions, and the gameplay is very different, and they also are bad as well. So yeah, basically I've got it in here because like I like to play it, and it's like the gameplay does not work at all in any way. Basically, the only way to win is by spamming attacks correctly, because the gameplay is broken, like fundamentally. And I don't even know how they managed that, because there's a lot of potential moves and there's a lot of, like, the AI is clearly kind of smart, but it's still just impossible to get anywhere unless you just spam moves, like, cheaply and just chip them away. And Human Killing Machine is actually a much better fighting game, considering, like, it's made fun of a lot, but basically what happened was Capcom released Street Fighter 1 in the arcades, and it did okay, but it wasn't one of their biggest hits, and they had no intention of making a Street Fighter 2 at all. But on the home computer market, Street Fighter 1 sold very well. The thing is, back then, arcade games on computers were basically just rewritten from scratch, and the art was usually redrawn from scratch. So it was basically like a company called Tex in the UK. They redrew all the art and redid all the code without any access really to the arcade version, except like access to a machine, but no like direct access to the assets. And they basically just remade the game, and without the gameplay really matching or the art really matching. But it sold very well though. It sold very well on the Amiga and on the Atari, and basically US Gold went to Capcom and they said, we really want a Street Fighter 2 because we know Street Fighter 1 was a huge hit for us in Europe. Basically the US market and the Europe market were quite separated. There was a company called US Gold that actually contacted Capcom. The thing is, there was some platforms like in America there was a Commodore 64 and a PC version of Street Fighter 1 that were released by Capcom USA onto the US market, and I don't know how well they sold, but they were completely separately made from the European versions. And there was also the joke about that is because Commodore 64 was popular in Europe as well. US Gold released a European version of Street Fighter 1 for the Commodore 64, and that version was terrible, and the American version was much better. The Commodore 64 version by like European version maybe had slightly better graphics, but it played really terribly and nothing like the real game. But the Capcom USA version that was released in America actually was good. So what US Gold decided to do is license the Capcom USA version. They released both. So the Commodore 64 version had the European version on one side of the tape and the American version on the other side of the tape. Interesting. And yeah, so the PC version released by US Gold for some reason, because US Gold did not pay anybody to make a PC version of Street Fighter 1. They just licensed the Capcom USA version. And yeah, so Long story short, US Gold went to Capcom in Japan and they said, okay, so we want to release a version of Street Fighter 2 in Europe for computers only, not an arcade version. And Capcom Japan said, we're kind of interested because we are not interested in this shit. Like, if we get some money out of it, but we're not going to make we're not actually planning on making a Street Fighter 2 anyway. But kind of by that point, they were thinking about making Final Fight, which was going to, like, they were thinking about calling that Street Fighter 2. And but in the end they decided not to, and then they decided to just make another fighting game, because fighting games were getting very popular again, ignoring everything Capcom was doing. In the very early 90s, late 80s, there were a few fighting games released by other companies that were doing okay in the arcades, and Capcom was like, oh, we'll make a Street Fighter 2 that's like Street Fighter 1. And they made it, and it was like, I don't know if you heard of Street Fighter 2. It was like a medium level hit. But anyway, so basically, Human Killing Machine is what was left over, because it's what US Gold had made as Street Fighter 2 in Europe. And yeah, so you can play it, and it's basically a game that was very nearly called Street Fighter 2, very nearly, but not actually. But you could probably modify it and just change the title to say Street Fighter 2. And then you could imagine that you're in a parallel universe, alternative reality, whatever, where that version was the Street Fighter 2 version. The gameplay is massively underrated. I think the gameplay, like, compared to Rise of the Robots, Human Killing Machine is a way better fighting game. But yeah. So yeah, if you do play it, you need to be careful what version you play. Most versions on different platforms aren't very good. So, like the Commodore 64 version, the Spectrum version, and the PC version of Human Killing Machine, not very good. The Amiga version, most Amiga versions are corrupted because the version of the disc that people were copying online is corrupted, and so a lot of the art is corrupted. And yeah, so basically the Atari ST version is the only version that you should play if you want to play it. And it's not a bad game. I think actually, I mean, considering it came out in like 1988. So yeah. Next is goals and stuff. So yeah, so basically I want like a creative outlet. For me that's like important, I guess, because I haven't been doing anything remotely creative for a long time. So yeah. I have weird subjective media tastes that are objectively correct. This just means that, you know, I have weird opinions about media generally, I would say. So that gives me more to talk about, and a bit of a like angle to work on. Ultimately, I want some kind of community based around my content. I think that's pretty normal. At the moment, I don't have any fans really, which is kind of annoying, but it was kind of bad. I mean, like, realistically, I think it's very hard to it's very hard in this space to get people to watch your stuff generally, and I think YouTube does not really help you in any way. So yeah, but I do, in the long run, I want some kind of community around my content, which will like help me to grow and like do different types of content and so on. In terms of streams, I will probably only stream once a week at most if people want me to stream once a week, or if people don't want me to stream, then I won't, or if it's just not that interesting for me to do streams. Because a stream, it realistically is just going to be me prattling on to nobody, and then maybe like a person will come back and watch it at some point. Maybe, but maybe not. So, yeah. So the limited time thing is like, yeah. People who know me, they know that I'm sick. I'm very sick. That's why it's a limited time. I won't go into it any further. But I do have another video about that. So yeah, so I've got socials here, so there's my YouTube channel. Like, if you're watching this, you should know what my YouTube channel is. You should know what my Twitter is, and you should know what my Discord is, because there's links to my Discord all around the place. But there's like nobody in my Discord. So, yeah. So I've got, my model is from Etsy. I did not spend very much money on it. I manually modified it a bit, but it's basically by MeQT, so it's like a VTube Studio model, so it's live 2D. in other assets, Troll SB. That's just that, like, some of the art, like my logo and the lines and stuff, are by Troll SB, and also, like, the animation I did myself for the background. I don't know if anybody likes how it looks, but I think it looks alright. So, yeah, so that's it. I've been doing this too long. So 50 minutes. Ooh. Yeah, that's a long stream. That's a very long stream. So I'm